The dust kicked up around Lily Greene's worn boots as she dragged the plow through soil that seemed more stubborn than any mule she'd ever known. And somewhere behind her, 10-year-old Tommy was supposed to be hauling water from the creek, but she could hear him singing instead of working, which meant they'd be behind on everything again today. It was 1878 in San Angelo, Texas, and the September heat showed no mercy even as autumn supposedly approached. Lily wiped her forehead with the back of her hand, leaving a streak of dirt across her tanned skin. At 22 years old, she'd been raising Tommy alone for 8 years now, ever since their parents had died in the influenza outbreak that swept through Greene County. She'd been just 14 when she'd stood over those two graves, holding her 2-year-old brother's hand, promising herself she'd keep him safe no matter what it took. The small plot of land they worked had been their father's dream, 40 acres of Texas soil that fought them every single day. Lily had learned to shoot, to plow, to fix fences, to do everything a man could do and more. She'd turned down 3 marriage proposals over the years, not because the men were cruel or unkind, but because each one had made it clear that Tommy would need to earn his keep or be sent to work for someone else. Her brother wasn't a burden to be managed. He was her family, her responsibility, her whole world. "Tommy Greene, if that water isn't here in 5 minutes, you'll be eating dry biscuits for supper," she called out, trying to sound stern but unable to keep the affection from her voice. The singing stopped abruptly, replaced by the sound of sloshing water and running feet. Tommy appeared around the corner of their small cabin, water spilling from both buckets he carried, his sandy hair falling into his eyes. "I was just keeping the coyotes away with my voice, Lily. You always say singing helps pass the time." "I say that about working, not about avoiding working," she said, but she was smiling as she took one of the buckets from him. The boy had their mother's green eyes and their father's stubborn chin, and every time she looked at him, her heart ached with love and determination. "Come on, we need to get these seeds in the ground before the soil dries out completely." They worked together in the fading afternoon light, Lily showing Tommy how to space the winter wheat seeds properly, how to cover them just enough but not too much. Her back ached and her hands were calloused and cracked, but she never complained. This was her life, and most days she found it enough. As the sun began to set, painting the Texas sky in shades of orange and purple, they heard the sound of a horse approaching. Lily straightened, her hand instinctively moving to the rifle she kept propped against the fence post. Visitors were rare, and in these parts, rare often meant trouble. The rider came into view, sitting tall on a strong bay horse. Even from a distance, Lily could see he was young, probably close to her own age, with dark hair and a weathered hat pulled low over his eyes. He rode with the easy confidence of someone who'd spent more time in the saddle than on the ground. "Evening," he called out when he was close enough, his voice carrying a warm, gentle tone that immediately made Lily relax her grip on the rifle, though she didn't move away from it. "I'm looking for the McFadden place. Got turned around somewhere back by the river." "You're about 3 miles off," Lily said, shading her eyes against the setting sun to get a better look at him. "Head back the way you came. Take the right fork instead of the left. Follow it until you see the cottonwood split by lightning. Their place is just beyond that." The cowboy tipped his hat in thanks, but as he turned his horse, the animal suddenly stumbled, letting out a distressed whinny. The rider dismounted quickly, running his hand down the horse's front leg with practiced gentleness. When he looked up, Lily could see the concern etched on his face. "She's picked up a stone or something worse," he said, his voice tight with worry. "I hate to impose, but would you mind if I took a look at her here? I don't want to make her walk on it if it's bad." Lily found herself nodding before she'd consciously made the decision. There was something about the way he touched the horse, the genuine care in his voice that spoke to her. "Tommy, fetch the lantern. It's getting too dark to see properly." The cowboy glanced up at her then, and Lily saw his face clearly for the first time. He had kind eyes, brown and deep, with small lines at the corners that suggested he smiled often. There was a gentleness to his features that seemed at odds with his strong build and capable hands. "Name's Blake Dalton," he said, returning his attention to the horse's hoof. "I appreciate your kindness, madam. Lily Greene, that's my brother Tommy." She moved closer, her curiosity getting the better of her caution. "You know horses?" "Been working with them since I could walk," Blake said, carefully picking up the horse's hoof. In the lantern light Tommy brought, they could see a sharp stone wedged deep in the soft part of the hoof. "There you are, you troublemaker. This is going to hurt her some when I pull it out. She might kick." "Tommy, step back," Lily instructed, but she moved closer herself. "I can hold her head if you need." Blake looked at her with something like surprise and respect. "That would help, thank you." Lily positioned herself at the horse's head, speaking soft words and stroking the mare's neck while Blake worked. The horse did kick when the stone came free, but Blake had anticipated it, moving smoothly out of the way. Blood welled up from where the stone had been embedded. "I've got some salve in the cabin," Lily heard herself saying. "It's for the stock, but it works just as well on horses. Keep infection out." "I couldn't ask you to," Blake started, but Lily was already moving toward the cabin. "Tommy, bring Mr. Dalton's horse to the lean-to. Walk her slow." "Blake, come inside and I'll give you the salve." She didn't know what had possessed her to be so forward, inviting a stranger into their home. But there was something about Blake Dalton that felt safe, trustworthy. Maybe it was the way he'd worried over his horse, or the respectful way he'd spoken to her, not talking down to her or dismissing her knowledge like so many men did. Inside the cabin, Lily was acutely aware of how modest their home was. One room with a sleeping loft where Tommy slept, a rough-hewn table and chairs her father had made, a cook stove that barely held heat, and two narrow beds separated by a hanging quilt. Everything was clean but worn, patched and repatched. If Blake noticed their poverty, he had the grace not to show it. He removed his hat respectfully, holding it in his hands as Lily rummaged through her small collection of medicines and supplies. "Here," she said, handing him a tin. "Clean the wound first, then apply this twice a day. She shouldn't be ridden for at least 3 days, longer if the wound is as deep as it looked." Blake turned the tin over in his hands, then looked up at her with those warm brown eyes. "Miss Greene, I'm grateful for your help, but I'm afraid I'm in a predicament now. The McFadens are expecting me to start work tomorrow morning. I was supposed to arrive today, but I got delayed helping a family fix their wagon wheel. Now, with my horse lame, I don't know how I'll make it there in time. You're going to work for the McFadens." Lily tried to keep the surprise from her voice. The McFadens ran one of the most successful ranches in the area, with hundreds of cattle and at least a dozen hands working for them. "Yes, madam. I've been working ranches up north, but I wanted to come to Texas. Heard good things about this area." He glanced around the cabin again, and this time Lily thought she saw understanding in his eyes, not judgment. "I suppose I could walk through the night, but I hate to leave my horse." Tommy burst through the door then, his face flushed with excitement. "Mr. Dalton, your horse is a real beauty." "What's her name? How old is she? Where did you get her?" "Tommy Manners," Lily said, but Blake was smiling. "Her name is Copper. She's 6 years old, and I raised her from a foal. Her mother was the finest horse I've ever known." He crouched down to Tommy's level, speaking to him like an equal. "You like horses, do you? I love them." Tommy's whole face lit up. Lily promised that when we have enough saved, we can get a proper horse instead of just old Bess the mule. I'm going to learn to ride and everything." Blake glanced up at Lily, and she felt heat rise to her cheeks. Their dreams must sound so small to someone like him, someone who owned such a fine horse and had real work waiting for him at a prosperous ranch. But Blake's expression held no mockery. "A boy should know how to ride. It's an important skill out here." An idea was forming in Lily's mind, one that seemed crazy even as she considered it. But they needed help, had needed it for years, and maybe this was Providence, a good man arriving at their door just when they needed him most. "Mr. Dalton," she said slowly, "what if I proposed a trade? You can stay here while your horse heals. In exchange, maybe you could help us with some of the heavier work around the place. There's fence that needs mending, part of the roof that needs fixing, and—" She hesitated, then pushed forward, "and maybe you could teach Tommy to ride. On Copper, once she's healed." Blake stood, considering her words carefully. She could see him taking in the cabin again, the signs of hard work and harder living, the way Tommy looked up at him with such hope in his young eyes. "Miss Greene," he said finally, "I think that's a fair trade, but I need to be honest with you. The McFadens are expecting me. I need to ride out there tomorrow, explain the situation, see if they'll hold the position for me for a few days." "You could take Bess," Tommy piped up. "She's slow, but she's sturdy. She could get you there and back." Lily wanted to hush him, but Blake was nodding thoughtfully. "If you're willing to lend me your mule, I could make it there and back in a day. Talk to the McFadens, explain about my horse. They're supposed to be good people. Maybe they'll understand." "Stay for supper," Lily found herself saying. "It's not much, just beans and cornbread, but you should eat before you decide anything." Something in Blake's expression softened further. "Miss Greene, I would be honored to share your supper." As Lily prepared the simple meal, she found herself hyper-aware of Blake's presence in their small cabin. He didn't sit idle, instead asking Tommy about the farm, about his studies, about his life. Tommy, who was usually shy around strangers, chattered away happily, telling Blake about the fox den they'd found by the creek, about the book of adventure stories Lily had traded for in town, about his dreams of seeing the ocean someday. Blake listened to it all with genuine interest, asking questions and sharing his own stories. He told them about growing up on a small ranch in Colorado, about learning to rope and ride from his father, about the vast herds of cattle he'd helped drive north to the railheads. "Where's your family now?" Tommy asked with the blunt curiosity of a child. Blake's expression clouded slightly. "My parents died 3 years back. Fever took them both within a week of each other. I have a sister who married and moved to California. Haven't seen her in 2 years now." "Our parents died too," Tommy said matter-of-factly. 8 years ago. But Lily took care of me. She's the best sister in the whole world." Lily felt tears prick her eyes at her brother's simple declaration. When she set the plates on the table, her hands were shaking slightly. Blake caught her eye and smiled at her, a smile of understanding and something else, something warm that made her heart skip unexpectedly. They ate together at the rough wooden table, and Lily couldn't remember the last time a meal had felt so pleasant. Usually it was just her and Tommy, tired from the day's work, too exhausted for much conversation. But Blake's presence changed everything. He complimented the cornbread, asked for a second helping of beans, and told stories that made Tommy laugh so hard he nearly fell off his chair. After supper, Blake insisted on helping clean up despite Lily's protests. As they worked side by side, washing and drying the tin plates, Lily was acutely aware of how close he stood, the warmth radiating from him, the way his hands moved with capable efficiency. "You've done a remarkable thing," Blake said quietly, so Tommy wouldn't hear from where he was getting ready for bed in the loft. "Raising a boy on your own, keeping this place going. It can't have been easy." Lily shrugged, uncomfortable with the praise. "I did what needed doing. He's my brother. I love him." "Still," Blake persisted, "not many 14-year-old girls would have had the strength to do what you did. Most would have given up, would have let the state take the boy, would have gone to live with relatives, or married quickly for security." "I had offers of help," Lily admitted, drying the last plate with more force than necessary. "Relatives who wanted to take Tommy but not me. Marriage proposals from men who saw me as free labor and Tommy as a burden. I chose to keep us together, keep our parents' land. Some days I wonder if I made the right choice. We're barely scraping by, and Tommy deserves more than this hardscrabble life." Blake was quiet for a moment, then said, "Seems to me that boy up there has everything he needs. He has someone who loves him, who's teaching him to work hard and be decent. That's worth more than all the money in the world." Lily looked up at him, surprised by the emotion in his voice. In the lamplight, Blake's face was open and honest, and she felt something shift in her chest, some wall she'd built around herself beginning to crack. "Thank you," she said softly, "for saying that, and for being kind to Tommy. He doesn't get much chance to talk to men, to see what a good man looks like." Blake held her gaze, and Lily felt the air between them charge with something she didn't quite understand but didn't want to end. Then Tommy called down good night, breaking the moment, and they stepped apart. "I should check on Copper one more time before I bed down," Blake said, settling his hat back on his head. "Thank you for supper, Miss Greene. It was one of the best meals I've had in a long time." "You can call me Lily," she said, then felt her cheeks heat at her own boldness. "Since you'll be staying for a few days." Blake's smile was slow and warm. "Then you should call me Blake. Good night, Lily." After he'd gone to the lean to where they'd settled him with some blankets, Lily lay in her narrow bed, staring at the ceiling and listening to Tommy's soft snores from the loft. Her mind was racing, replaying every moment of the evening, every word Blake had spoken, the way he'd looked at her. She was being foolish, she told herself. Blake Dalton was just passing through, helping them out for a few days before moving on to his real life, his real work. There was no point in letting herself feel anything for him. She'd spent 8 years protecting herself and Tommy, building walls to keep them safe. She couldn't let those walls crumble now because of one handsome cowboy with kind eyes and a gentle voice. But as she finally drifted off to sleep, her last thought was of Blake's smile, and the way her name had sounded in his voice. The next morning, Lily woke before dawn as always, building up the fire and starting breakfast. She was surprised to find Blake already up, tending to the animals with easy efficiency. "You didn't need to do that," she said, stirring the pot of oatmeal. "Habit," Blake replied, washing his hands in the basin by the door. "On a ranch, you wake with the sun. Besides, I wanted to check on Copper. The swelling's already going down. Your salve is working." Tommy thundered down from the loft, delighted to see Blake still there. Over breakfast, they discussed the plan. Blake would ride Bess to the McFadden ranch, explain the situation, and hopefully return by evening. In the meantime, Lily and Tommy would continue with their regular work. As Blake prepared to leave, Lily found herself fighting the urge to ask him to hurry back. Instead, she gave him directions to the McFadden place and a canteen of water for the journey. "Thank you, Lily," Blake said, and the way he said her name still sent a shiver through her. "I'll be back before dark." They watched him ride away on Old Bess, the mule's plodding gait so different from the graceful way Copper moved. Tommy waved until Blake disappeared from sight, then turned to his sister with knowing eyes that seemed far too old for his 10 years. "You like him," Tommy said simply. "I don't know what you're talking about," Lily replied, but she could feel her cheeks burning. "Come on, those fields won't plow themselves." But as they worked through the morning, Lily found her eyes constantly drifting to the horizon, watching for Blake's return. She told herself she was just being practical, making sure he came back so he could help with the work he'd promised to do. But deep down, she knew it was more than that. There was something about Blake Dalton that had touched a part of her she'd thought she'd locked away forever. The part that was still a young woman, not just a guardian and a farmer and a provider. The part that dreamed of partnership and companionship and maybe even love. The day seemed to drag endlessly. Lily and Tommy finished the planting, mended a section of fence, and hauled water until Lily's arms ached. As the sun began its descent toward the horizon, Lily caught herself scanning the distance more and more frequently. "What if he doesn't come back?" Tommy asked as they washed up before supper. "Then he doesn't come back," Lily said, trying to sound unconcerned. "We've managed fine on our own for 8 years. We'll keep managing." But even as she said it, she felt a hollow ache in her chest at the thought of never seeing Blake again. Just as the sun was painting the sky orange and red, they heard Bess's distinctive bray. Lily's heart leaped, and she had to force herself not to run to meet him. Tommy had no such reservations, racing across the yard as Blake dismounted. "You came back," Tommy shouted, and Lily saw Blake grin at the boy's enthusiasm. "Of course I came back. I gave you my word, didn't I?" Blake's eyes found Lily's over Tommy's head, and the warmth in them made her breath catch. "The McFaddens are good people. I explained about Copper, and Mr. McFadden said the position would wait for me. He said a man who cares enough about his horse to make sure she heals properly is the kind of man he wants working for him." "That's wonderful news," Lily said, meaning it even though it meant Blake would be leaving soon. "You must be starving. I've got stew cooking." Over supper, Blake told them more about the McFadden ranch. It was even bigger than Lily had thought, with nearly 1,000 head of cattle and ambitious plans to expand. The pay was good, and there was a bunkhouse for the hands, and Mr. McFadden had promised Blake he could work his way up to ranch foreman if he proved himself. "It sounds like a great opportunity," Lily said, trying to inject enthusiasm into her voice. "You must be excited." Blake was quiet for a moment, pushing beans around his plate. "It is a good opportunity," he said finally, "but I made a promise to help you folks, and I keep my promises. Copper needs at least 3 more days of rest anyway. So tomorrow, I'm going to start on that roof and then we'll work on the fences and I'm going to teach Tommy to ride." Tommy let out a whoop of joy, but Lily shook her head. "Blake, we can't ask you to stay. You've got your own life, your own plans. You didn't ask, I'm offering." Blake met her eyes across the table, and Lily felt pinned by the intensity of his gaze. "Besides, I want to." Over the next 3 days, Blake became a part of their daily rhythm in a way that felt startlingly natural. He woke early and worked alongside Lily in the fields, his strength making quick work of tasks that would have taken her twice as long. He taught Tommy not just how to ride, but how to care for a horse, how to read an animal's moods and needs. In the evenings, after supper, they would sit outside the cabin, watching the stars come out while Tommy practiced reading aloud from his precious book. Blake would whittle, his hands creating small figures that he gave to Tommy with a shrug and a smile. A horse, a longhorn, a coyote, each one perfect in its detail. And slowly, Lily felt herself falling. It wasn't anything dramatic or sudden. It was in the small moments. The way Blake would hand her tools before she asked for them, anticipating her needs. The way he spoke to Tommy with respect and patience, never talking down to him. The way he looked at her sometimes when he thought she wasn't watching, with an expression that made her heart race. On the third evening, after Tommy had gone to bed, Lily and Blake found themselves alone by the dying fire. Copper was nearly healed, ready to travel. Tomorrow, Blake would ride to the McFadden ranch to start his new job. "I'm going to miss this," Blake said quietly, staring into the flames. "These past few days, they've been some of the best I've had in a long time." "We'll miss you too," Lily said, and was alarmed to feel tears threatening. "Tommy especially. He's gotten so attached to you." "Just Tommy?" Blake asked, turning to look at her. Lily couldn't meet his eyes. "I've gotten used to having help around here. It's been nice not doing everything alone." "Lily." Blake's voice was gentle but insistent. "Look at me." She did, and the expression on his face made her breath catch. There was longing there and tenderness and something that looked like hope. "I don't want to leave," Blake said simply. "These 3 days with you and Tommy, it's felt more like home than anywhere I've been since my parents died. But I need that job. The pay is good, and I need to build up some savings, some security." "I understand," Lily said, trying to keep her voice steady. "You've already helped us so much, more than you needed to." "What if I didn't leave completely?" Blake asked, leaning forward. "The McFadden ranch is only 3 miles away. On my days off, I could come help you here. Keep teaching Tommy to ride. Help with the heavy work." Lily's heart was pounding so hard she was sure Blake must be able to hear it. "Why would you do that? You don't owe us anything." "Because I care about you," Blake said, and the simple honesty of it nearly undid her. "Both of you. Because when I imagine my future now, you're in it. I know it's fast. I know we've only known each other 3 days, but Lily, I feel something for you that I've never felt before." Lily felt tears slip down her cheeks, but they weren't sad tears. "I feel it too. I've been trying not to, trying to protect myself and Tommy, but I feel it too." Blake reached out and gently wiped the tears from her cheeks with his thumb, his touch warm and careful. "Then let me court you properly. Let me come visit. Let me help you. Let me be part of your lives. We'll take it slow, do it right. I need to establish myself at the ranch anyway, prove myself to the McFaddens. But in time, if things go well, maybe we could be a real family. You, me, and Tommy." "A family," Lily whispered, letting herself imagine it for the first time. Not struggling alone, not bearing every burden by herself, but sharing it with someone strong and kind and good. "If you'll have me," Blake said. "I know I'm just a ranch hand, I don't have much to offer right now. But I'm a hard worker and I'm honest, and I love you, Lily Greene. I know it's too soon to say that, but it's the truth. I love you, and I love that boy in there like he was my own brother." Lily felt more tears fall, but she was smiling now, a smile that felt like it might split her face. "I love you too. It's crazy and fast and probably foolish, but I love you too." Blake pulled her into his arms then, and Lily went willingly, burying her face in his chest and breathing in the scent of him, horse and leather and something uniquely Blake. He held her like she was precious, like she was something to be treasured, and for the first time in 8 years, Lily let herself be held. They stood like that for a long time, wrapped in each other's arms under the Texas stars, not speaking because no words were needed. Finally, reluctantly, they pulled apart. "I should go," Blake said, though he made no move to leave. "It's not proper for me to stay here now, not with things between us being what they are." "I know," Lily said, even though every part of her wanted him to stay. "You'll come visit." "Every chance I get," Blake promised. "And Lily, we're going to do this right. I'm going to work hard, save money, prove to you and Tommy and everyone else that I can provide for this family. And when the time is right, I'm going to ask you to marry me." "When the time is right," Lily agreed. "I'm going to say yes." Blake kissed her forehead then, a gentle touch that felt like a promise, and then he was gone, leading Copper out into the night to make the ride to the McFadden ranch. Lily stood in the yard long after he'd disappeared from sight, her hand pressed to where he'd kissed her, feeling like her whole world had shifted on its axis. The next weeks fell into a new pattern. Blake came to visit every Sunday, his one day off, arriving just after dawn and staying until the stars came out. He worked alongside Lily in the fields, his strong back making quick work of the heavy labor. He continued Tommy's riding lessons, the boy becoming more confident in the saddle with each passing week. But more than the help, more than the practical assistance, it was the joy Blake brought with him that transformed their lives. He made them laugh with his stories and his gentle teasing. He brought small gifts, nothing fancy but treasured all the same. Hard candies for Tommy, a new book of poems, ribbons for Lily's hair. And slowly, carefully, he courted Lily with an old-fashioned propriety that she found both endearing and frustrating. He held her hand as they walked to the creek. He stole quick kisses when Tommy wasn't looking, but he never pushed for more, never assumed he had any rights to her. "I respect you too much," he said one Sunday evening when Lily had asked him, somewhat boldly, why he was always such a gentleman. "When we come together fully, it's going to be as husband and wife with everything done right and proper." "You're going to make me wait until we're married?" Lily asked, half exasperated, half charmed. "I'm going to make us both wait," Blake said with a rueful smile. "Believe me, it's not easy. But you deserve to be courted properly, to have a proper wedding. You've had to be so strong for so long, had to do everything the hard way. Let me give you this one thing the right way." As autumn deepened into winter, their relationship deepened too. Blake shared his dreams with her, plans to eventually have his own ranch someday, a small operation where he could work with horses. Lily shared her fears, her worry that she'd failed Tommy, that their hardscrabble life wasn't enough. "You haven't failed anyone," Blake assured her, his arm around her shoulders as they sat on the cabin steps watching Tommy practice roping a fence post. "Look at him. He's happy, he's healthy, he's learning. He's a good kid, Lily, and that's all because of you." Winter brought its own challenges. The crops were in, but money was tighter than ever. Lily had to sell off some of their stores just to buy flour and sugar for the winter. Blake helped where he could, bringing meat from the ranch, but Lily's pride made it hard for her to accept too much. "You're not taking charity," Blake said firmly when she tried to refuse a haunch of venison. "You're accepting help from someone who cares about you. There's a difference." It was a cold January Sunday when Blake arrived with a determined expression on his face. He'd been working at the McFadden Ranch for 4 months now, and Lily could see the changes in him. He carried himself with even more confidence, spoke of his work with pride. Mr. McFadden had already promoted him to senior hand, impressed by his work ethic and his way with horses. After the day's work was done and supper was eaten, Blake asked Tommy if he could speak to his sister alone. Tommy, who'd been waiting for this moment for weeks if his knowing grin was any indication, made himself scarce, heading to the lean-to to check on Copper. Blake took both of Lily's hands in his expression serious but his eyes warm. "Lily Greene, I know we've only known each other for 4 months. I know some people might think that's too fast. But I've been on my own for 3 years now, working ranches all over, and I've never felt about anyone the way I feel about you. You're strong and brave and beautiful, and you've made me want things I didn't even know I wanted. A home, a family, someone to build a life with." Lily's heart was pounding, tears already forming in her eyes because she knew what was coming, had been waiting for it with a mixture of anticipation and disbelief, that this wonderful man actually wanted her. Blake dropped to one knee, pulling a small box from his pocket. "I don't have much, but I've been saving every penny I could. Lily Greene, would you do me the honor of becoming my wife?" He opened the box, revealing a simple gold band with a small stone that caught the firelight. It wasn't fancy, but to Lily, it was the most beautiful thing she'd ever seen. "Yes," she whispered. Then louder, "Yes, Blake Dalton, I'll marry you." Blake stood and swept her into his arms, spinning her around as she laughed and cried at the same time. When he finally set her down, he kissed her properly for the first time, a deep kiss full of love and promise and barely restrained passion. Tommy burst back into the cabin, whooping with joy. "Does this mean Blake's going to be my brother now?" "More than that," Blake said, crouching down to Tommy's level. "If it's all right with you, I'd like to be your guardian too, officially. Your sister shouldn't have to carry that responsibility alone anymore." Tommy threw his arms around Blake's neck. "I'd like that. I'd like that a lot." They planned the wedding for early spring, giving Blake time to save more money and giving Lily time to prepare. The McFaddens, who'd grown fond of Blake, offered to host the celebration at their ranch. The whole county was invited, a traditional Texas barn dance and barbecue. Those weeks of preparation were some of the happiest of Lily's life. She made her wedding dress from fabric Blake bought in town, staying up late by lamplight to get every stitch perfect. Tommy practiced his reading so he could recite a poem at the ceremony. Blake built them a new bed, larger than Lily's narrow single, with a carved headboard that featured intertwined vines and flowers. "For our new beginning," he said when he presented it to her. The wedding day dawned clear and warm, the first truly spring-like day of the year. Lily wore her new dress, simple white cotton with blue ribbons at the waist. Tommy had picked wildflowers for her to carry, a messy but heartfelt bouquet. The ceremony was held in the McFaddens' big barn, decorated with more wildflowers and bunting. Half the county had turned out, and Lily was overwhelmed by how many people had come. People she'd barely spoken to in the years she'd been struggling alone. When she walked down the makeshift aisle, Tommy at her side, all Lily could see was Blake waiting for her at the other end. He looked handsome in his good suit, his dark hair combed back, his eyes shining with love as he watched her approach. The circuit preacher, who came through San Angelo once a month, performed the ceremony. When it came time for the vows, Blake's voice was strong and clear as he promised to love, honor, and cherish her all the days of his life. Lily's voice shook with emotion as she made the same promises, meaning every word with her whole heart. "I now pronounce you husband and wife. You may kiss your bride." Blake pulled Lily close and kissed her thoroughly, to the cheers and applause of everyone gathered. When they finally broke apart, both of them were grinning like fools, and Lily felt happier than she'd ever thought possible. The celebration that followed was wonderful. There was more food than Lily had seen in years. Smoked beef, roasted chicken, potatoes, cornbread, pies, and cakes. Musicians played fiddles and guitars, and people danced until their feet ached. Blake danced with Lily again and again, holding her close and whispering sweet words in her ear that made her blush and laugh. Tommy danced too, passed from partner to partner by the kind ladies of the county, his face flushed with happiness and cake. When he recited his poem during a lull in the music, his clear young voice carrying across the barn, there wasn't a dry eye in the place. As the sun set and the party continued, Mr. McFadden pulled Blake and Lily aside. He was a big man with kind eyes and a booming voice, and he'd been generous to them throughout the courtship. "Blake, you're one of the best hands I've ever had," Mr. McFadden said. "But I know you've got dreams of your own place someday, so I want to make you an offer. There's a section of land on the far edge of my property, about 100 acres near the creek. It's good land, but too far from the main ranch for me to use properly. I'll sell it to you for a fair price, and you can pay me back over time out of your wages." Lily felt Blake's hand tighten on hers, felt the hope and excitement radiating from him. "Sir, that's incredibly generous, but I couldn't—" "You can and you will," Mr. McFadden interrupted. "A man should have his own land to work. Besides, your wife has that 40 acres already. Between the two parcels, you'd have a good start on a real ranch. You could run cattle, breed horses, make a real go of it." "What about my job?" Blake asked. "You keep working for me just like before. In your off hours and on Sundays you work your own land. In a few years, once you're established, maybe you transition to working your own place full-time. But I won't lose a good man just because he's got ambitions." Blake looked at Lily, his eyes asking the question. She squeezed his hand and nodded, too emotional to speak. Their own ranch. "A real future. Mr. McFadden, I accept," Blake said, shaking the older man's hand. "Thank you, sir. You won't regret this." "I know I won't. Now go dance with your bride. This is your wedding day, after all." As they danced under the stars, Lily whispered to Blake, "Can you believe it? Our own land. A real chance." "I can believe it," Blake said, pulling her closer. "I can believe in us, in our future. We're going to build something amazing, Lily. For us, for Tommy, for the family we're going to have." "Family," Lily repeated and let herself imagine it fully for the first time. Children of their own, running through fields they owned, growing up with security and love. It seemed like an impossible dream, but with Blake's arms around her and Tommy's laughter ringing across the barn, it felt within reach. Later that night, Blake carried Lily across the threshold of their cabin, Tommy having been sent to spend the night with the McFadden children. Alone for the first time as husband and wife, they stood in the firelight, suddenly shy with each other despite months of courtship. "Mrs. Dalton," Blake said softly, reaching out to touch her cheek. "My wife." "My husband," Lily replied, leaning into his touch. Blake kissed her then, gentle at first, then deeper, all the passion they'd been restraining for months finally finding its release. He lifted her in his arms and carried her to the new bed he'd built. And there, in the warmth of the fire and the safety of their home, they became husband and wife in truth. Afterward, lying in Blake's arms, her head on his chest, listening to his heartbeat, Lily felt a peace she'd never known. For 8 years, she'd been alone, carrying every burden by herself. Now she had a partner, someone to share the load, someone who loved her and Tommy with his whole heart. "What are you thinking?" Blake asked, his fingers tracing lazy patterns on her shoulder. "I'm thinking about how lucky I am," Lily said honestly. "How close I came to never knowing this, never knowing you. If your horse hadn't picked up that stone, if you hadn't needed help that day, we might never have met." "I don't believe that," Blake said firmly. "I think we were meant to find each other. Maybe not that exact day, but somehow, someway, we would have met. Some things are just meant to be." The next months were busy and hard but filled with joy. Blake continued working at the McFadden ranch, but every spare moment was spent working their combined land. They sold Lily's 40 acres to Mr. McFadden, adding it to the 100 acres they were buying, giving them a contiguous piece of land to work with. Blake's dream of raising horses began to take shape. He bought 3 mares and a good stallion, using every penny of his savings. Lily was scared at first, worried about risking so much on an uncertain venture, but Blake's confidence was contagious. "Trust me," he said. "I know horses. There's a market for good stock, and I can breed the best. Give me 3 years, and we'll be turning a real profit." Tommy thrived under Blake's attention and guidance. The boy was becoming a skilled rider, and Blake taught him everything he knew about caring for horses. In the evenings, Blake helped Tommy with his studies, his patience endless as he explained mathematics and geography. The first year of their marriage flew by in a blur of work and laughter and love. They expanded the cabin, adding a proper bedroom and a second sleeping room for Tommy. Blake built corrals and a small barn for the horses. Lily planted a garden that actually flourished, having the time and help to tend it properly. And in the fall, Lily discovered she was pregnant. She told Blake one evening as they sat on their porch, watching the sun set over their land. She'd been nervous about how he'd react, worried that a baby might be too much too soon, that they couldn't afford another mouth to feed. But Blake's reaction was everything she could have hoped for. He swept her up in his arms, tears in his eyes, and held her like she was the most precious thing in the world. "A baby," he kept saying, wonder in his voice. "We're going to have a baby." Tommy was equally thrilled when they told him at supper. "Am I going to be an uncle?" he asked. "You're going to be a big brother," Blake corrected. "This baby is going to be your family just as much as ours." The pregnancy was hard. Lily had never been sick a day in her life, but the baby seemed determined to make up for it. Blake took over more of the work, insisted she rest, drove her crazy with his worrying. But underneath the frustration, Lily was touched by his care, by how much he wanted this baby, wanted their family. In June of 1879, on a hot Texas night with the midwife in attendance and Blake pacing anxiously outside, Lily gave birth to a healthy baby boy. They named him Samuel, after Blake's father, and when Blake finally got to hold his son, Lily saw tears stream down his face. "Thank you," he whispered to her, his voice choked with emotion. "Thank you for this gift, for this life, for everything." "Thank you for finding us," Lily replied, exhausted but happy. "Thank you for making us a family." Tommy was fascinated by his baby brother, wanting to hold him and help care for him. Blake built a beautiful cradle that rocked gently, and the three of them would sit for hours, just watching the baby sleep. The ranch continued to grow. Blake's horses were gaining a reputation for quality, and buyers started coming from across the county. By the time Samuel was a year old, they'd paid off half their debt to Mr. McFadden and were starting to build real savings. Blake cut back his hours at the McFadden ranch, spending more time working their own land. Mr. McFadden was understanding, proud even, to see Blake's success. When Blake finally left his employ entirely to work the ranch full-time, Mr. McFadden threw them a party, celebrating the achievement of a good man who'd worked hard for his dreams. Life settled into a wonderful rhythm. Tommy, now 13, was nearly as good with horses as Blake. He'd shot up in height, looking more and more like their father, and Blake had started teaching him the business side of ranching, preparing him to be a full partner someday. Samuel grew into a cheerful toddler, always laughing, always getting into mischief. He adored his big brother Tommy, following him everywhere he could on unsteady legs. When Samuel was 2, Lily became pregnant again. This time the pregnancy was easier, and in early 1882 she gave birth to a daughter they named Rose. Blake had wanted Lily to choose the name, and she'd picked Rose after her mother. Their family felt complete. 2 growing boys and a baby daughter, a ranch that was prospering, a marriage built on love and respect and partnership. Lily sometimes thought about the frightened 14-year-old girl she'd been, standing alone at her parents' graves, wondering how she'd survive. That girl could never have imagined this life, this joy. "What are you smiling about?" Blake asked one evening. They were sitting on the porch, watching Tommy teach Samuel to rope while Rose slept in Lily's arms. "Just thinking about how far we've come," Lily said. "How different life is now." Blake put his arm around her, careful not to jostle the baby. "Do you ever regret it?" How hard those years were, struggling alone. Lily considered the question seriously. "No," she said finally. "Those years made me strong enough to appreciate this. They taught me what really matters, and they led me to you." "I love you, Lily Dalton," Blake said, kissing her temple. "More than I did on our wedding day, and I'll love you more tomorrow than I do today." As the sun set over their land, painting the sky in brilliant oranges and pinks, Lily looked at her family, her home, her life, and felt a gratitude so deep it brought tears to her eyes. She'd raised her brother alone, fought and struggled and survived. And because she'd been strong enough and stubborn enough to keep going, she'd been there that September evening when a cowboy with a lame horse had ridden into her life. Tommy came running up to the porch then, Samuel on his shoulders, both of them laughing. "Lily, Blake, watch this. I'm going to show Samuel how to spin a rope. You better not teach him anything too dangerous," Blake called, but he was grinning. He stood, offering his hand to Lily. "Come on. Let's go watch." As they walked across their land, Blake's arm around her waist, their daughter sleeping peacefully in her arms, their sons playing ahead of them, Lily felt complete in a way she'd never thought possible. She had her family, all of them together, safe and happy and whole. The years continued to pass, each one bringing new joys and challenges. The ranch prospered beyond their wildest dreams. Blake's horses became famous throughout Texas, sought after by ranchers and cavalry alike. They expanded their operations, buying more land, hiring hands to help with the work. Tommy grew into a fine young man, skilled and hardworking. At 18, he was Blake's full partner in the ranch, with a natural gift for training horses that even exceeded Blake's own abilities. The bond between Tommy and Blake was deep and true, more than guardian and ward, more even than brothers. Blake had become the father Tommy barely remembered, and Tommy had become the family Blake had lost. Samuel showed equal promise, though his interests ran more toward cattle than horses. When he turned 16, Blake helped him start a small herd, teaching him everything about breeding and raising beef cattle. The addition of cattle to their horse ranch made good financial sense, and Samuel threw himself into the work with passion and dedication. Rose grew into a spirited young girl who could ride as well as her brothers, and had her mother's determination and her father's gentle heart. She was a beauty, with Lily's green eyes and Blake's dark hair, and both her father and brothers were already dreading the day young men would come calling. By 1890, the Dalton Ranch was one of the most successful operations in Greene County. They had a real house now, 2 stories with glass windows and wooden floors, though Lily had insisted on keeping the original cabin as a reminder of where they'd started. Blake's hair was showing gray at the temples, and there were lines around his eyes from years of squinting into the Texas sun. But to Lily, he was as handsome as the day she'd met him. He still made her laugh, still held her close at night, still looked at her like she was the most amazing thing he'd ever seen. On their 12th wedding anniversary, Blake took Lily on a trip to San Antonio, leaving the ranch in Tommy's capable hands. It was the first time they'd been away together since their wedding, and Lily felt like a young bride again as they explored the city, ate in restaurants, and stayed in a real hotel. "You know what the best part of our success is?" Blake asked her one evening as they walked along the river, hand in hand. "What's that?" Lily asked. "That I get to see you happy. That I got to give you the life you deserved, the life you should have had all along." Blake stopped walking, turning to face her. "You saved yourself and Tommy through sheer will and determination. But I'm glad I got to be part of your journey, glad I got to make it a little easier." "You didn't make it easier," Lily said, reaching up to touch his face. "You made it possible. You gave me a partnership, a family, a life. You took 2 people who were barely surviving and helped us thrive. I don't know who I'd be without you, Blake Dalton, but I know I wouldn't be as happy." They kissed there by the river, 2 people who'd found each other against all odds and built something beautiful together. When they returned home, the whole family was waiting for them, and Lily's heart swelled with love. Tommy, now 22 and courting a nice girl from town. Samuel, 16 and growing taller every day. Rose, 8 years old and missing her 2 front teeth. This was her family, her life, her legacy. The years continued their march. Tommy married his sweetheart, Emma, in a beautiful ceremony, and within a year, Lily became a grandmother to a baby boy named Henry. Blake teased her mercilessly about being a grandmother at 36, but she could see how much he loved playing with his grandson, teaching him to ride just as he'd once taught Tommy. Samuel eventually married as well, a rancher's daughter named Clara, who was as comfortable with cattle as he was. They built a house on the far end of the property, running their growing cattle operation while remaining part of the family business. Rose, as predicted, attracted plenty of suitors, but she was in no hurry to marry. "I want to find what you and Papa have," she told Lily. "I want someone who sees me as a partner, not just a wife." "You're a smart girl," Lily said, pulling her daughter close, "and you will find that in time. Don't settle for anything less." It was 1895 when Blake and Lily sat on their porch, surrounded by children and grandchildren, celebrating 20 years of marriage. The ranch stretched out before them, hundreds of acres of Texas land that they'd built into something lasting. Tommy stood to make a toast, his arm around Emma, his own children at his feet. 20 years ago, my sister married a cowboy who'd ridden into our lives with a lame horse and a kind heart. None of us could have known how that one evening would change everything. But Blake didn't just marry Lily that day. He became my brother, my partner, my father in all the ways that matter. He took 2 people who were struggling alone and made us a family. So here's to Blake and Lily, to love, to family, to the life we've built together. Everyone raised their glasses, and Lily felt tears stream down her face as Blake pulled her close and kissed her forehead. Later, after everyone had gone home and the stars were bright overhead, Blake and Lily sat together in the porch swing he'd built years ago. "Do you ever think about that first night?" Lily asked. "When your horse picked up that stone and you needed help all the time," Blake admitted. "I think about how close I came to riding past your place, to choosing a different path, and I thank God every day that I didn't." "I was so scared that night," Lily confessed. "Scared to let you stay, scared to let you in, scared to hope that things could be different. But you were so kind, so gentle with Tommy, and something in my heart just knew." "Knew what?" Blake asked. "That you were the answer to prayers I'd been too afraid to even say out loud, that you were going to change everything." Lily turned in his arms to look at him properly. "And you did. You gave me everything, Blake. A partner, a family, a life beyond survival. You took a frightened girl who was barely hanging on and helped her become strong. You raised Tommy like he was your own, gave him a father and a future. You built this ranch, this legacy for all of us." "We built it together," Blake corrected. "Your strength, your determination, those 40 acres you'd held onto against all odds, that was the foundation. I just got to help you build on it." He paused, his voice getting thick with emotion. "You gave me everything, Lily. A home when I'd been wandering, a family when I was alone, a purpose beyond just existing. Loving you, building this life with you, raising our children, it's been the greatest privilege of my life." They sat in comfortable silence for a long moment, holding each other in the darkness. 20 more years," Lily said finally. "Let's plan on 20 more years at least." "At least," Blake agreed. "Though I intend to love you for 40 more, 50 if I can manage it." "Deal," Lily said and kissed him, tasting salt from both their tears. The years that followed were gentle ones. The ranch continued to prosper under Tommy and Samuel's joint management, with Blake transitioning into an advisory role. He spent his time training horses, teaching his grandchildren to ride, and sitting on the porch with Lily, watching the sunset over the land they'd built together. Rose eventually married a veterinarian from San Angelo, a kind man who shared her love of animals and treated her as an equal partner. She and her husband built a practice in town but visited the ranch often, and their own children added to the growing family. By 1905, Blake and Lily were in their early 50s, slowing down but still active, still in love, still grateful for every day together. The ranch had become a legacy, something that would outlive them, providing for generations to come. Tommy's oldest son, Henry, was showing the same gift for horses that his grandfather and father had, already talking about expanding their breeding program. Samuel's children were equally passionate about cattle. Rose's children were still young but already showing signs of inheriting the family's love of the land. On a warm spring evening, much like the one when they'd first met, Blake and Lily took a walk across their property, hand in hand like young lovers. They walked to where the old cabin still stood, preserved as a monument to where their journey had begun. "Sometimes I can hardly believe it's real," Lily said, looking at the cabin. "That frightened girl who lived here, struggling to keep her brother fed and safe, she feels like someone from a different life." "She was real," Blake said. "She was brave and strong and amazing. She survived when most people would have given up. And she was smart enough to take a chance on a wandering cowboy with a lame horse. That cowboy turned out to be the love of my life," Lily said, turning to face her husband. "My partner, my best friend, the father of my children. Everything good in my life traces back to you, Blake Dalton." "No," Blake said firmly. "Everything good in our lives traces back to your courage. You raised your brother alone when you were barely more than a child yourself. You held onto your land, your dignity, your hope. I just got lucky enough to be the one who found you." They kissed there by the old cabin, two people who'd weathered storms and celebrated victories, who'd built a life and a family from determination and love. As the sun set, painting the sky in the same oranges and pinks Lily remembered from that first evening, they walked back to the big house, where their children and grandchildren waited with supper and laughter and love. And there, surrounded by the family they'd built, on the land they'd worked, Lily looked at Blake and smiled. She'd raised her brother alone, fought against odds that should have crushed her. But a compassionate cowboy had become family to them both, had loved them, protected them, built a legacy with them. It wasn't just a happy ending. It was a beautiful life, hard-won and deeply treasured, full of love and laughter, and the kind of joy that comes from knowing you've found exactly where you belong. And as Blake took her hand under the table and squeezed it gently, his eyes still full of love after all these years, Lily knew that every struggle, every hard year, every moment of doubt had been worth it to get here, to this place, with this man, with this family. Their story had begun with a lame horse and a desperate girl brave enough to offer help. It had grown into something neither of them could have imagined. A ranch, a family, a dynasty, and most importantly, a love that had weathered every storm and grown stronger with each passing year. As the evening wore on and the grandchildren begged for stories, Blake told them about that first night, about meeting their grandmother and Uncle Tommy, about falling in love at first sight even though it took him months to admit it. "So the whole family exists because Copper picked up a stone?" Henry asked, wide-eyed. "The whole family exists because your grandmother was brave enough to help a stranger and kind enough to give him a chance," Blake corrected, looking at Lily with all the love in the world. "Everything good in my life started that evening." "Everything good in my life started when you came back," Lily added. "When you kept your promise and stayed. When you loved not just me, but Tommy too. when you made us a family." The grandchildren demanded more stories, and Blake and Lily obliged, telling tales of the early days, of building the ranch, of their wedding, of all the moments that had made their life together. With each story, Lily felt grateful all over again for the journey they'd traveled. Later, much later, after the children had been put to bed and the house was quiet, Blake and Lily sat together in their bedroom, the one they'd shared for years, watching the stars through the window. "I love you, Lily Dalton," Blake said, as he did every night. "Today, tomorrow, and forever." "I love you too, Blake Dalton," Lily replied, as she always did. "Thank you for finding us. Thank you for staying. Thank you for everything." They fell asleep in each other's arms, two people who'd found each other against all odds and built something beautiful. The ranch would continue. Their children and grandchildren would carry on their legacy. But the real legacy was the love they'd built, the family they'd created, the life they'd shared. In the end, it was a simple story. A girl who'd raised her brother alone, working herself to exhaustion to keep them together. A compassionate cowboy who needed help and had stayed to give it. Two lonely people who'd found each other and discovered that together they could build something lasting. It was a story of survival and hope, of determination and love, of family found and family made. It was a story that began in struggle and ended in joy, and it was real and true and completely theirs. The Dalton Ranch would stand for generations, a testament to what two people could build when they loved each other and refused to give up. And every evening, as the sun set over the Texas plains, the family would gather, and someone would tell the story again. The story of how it all began with a lame horse, a desperate girl, and a cowboy kind enough to love them both.